And then we will have Tim Bertolotti on art, race and reconciliation at Lower Loxley, looking at the debate over the controversial portrait at Lower Loxley and the different reactions from different members of the family. So get ready to roam the aisles of Underwoods and debate the walls of Lower Loxley in this session. And remember, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask the speakers, please put them in the chat and we'll hopefully have time to address them after each speaker. So I'm just going to find Jane and spotlight her.
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, can you say something, Jane, and then you'll pop up. Ah, there you are.
Right,
Brilliant.
here's me talking
Gotcha.
to you. Does that help?
Thank you very much.
Right, I'm going to try and share my screen now, and then will you tell me, Sarah, if I'm doing the right thing?
Brilliant.
Is that right? Can you see me or just the...
Yeah, we can see the screen and we can see you.
Well, thank you. I should say I don't have an academic background in department stores, but I do absolutely love them. In Archer's terms, I'm the same age as Clary, and I do remember very vividly William Grundy being born, so I've been listening for a while. And this is my very first academic paper of any kind at all, a fact of which I'm sure you will be become very apparent very, very quickly. So in this paper, I will explore the historical impact of department stores with particular reference to Underwoods and the curious case of its lack of traction in the Ambridge community. I will argue that Underwoods, like so many Borsetshire institutions, is an outlier in very many respects. Now, for anyone who's not had the pleasure of buying overpriced yoghurt in the Underwoods food hall, the magnetic north map of the Ambridge in Borsetshire district demonstrates that it sits between Victoria Street and Pitt Street, handily placed for Borchester Green, School and Botticelli's. But what was shopping like before the advent of department stores like Underwoods? Well, in the Georgian era, Borchester would have had high-class shops for the rich, who expected to be given credit and to pay when they felt like it. Prices weren't marked up, everything was negotiated, and clothes were made to measure by tailors and seamstresses. So imagine the excitement when Clark and Debenhams, a very early department store, offered ready-made dresses in 1813 and ready-made underwear by 1830. From the mid-19th century, drapers and grocers who wanted to diversify had the choice of buying additional, maybe adjacent properties or creating departments in their existing space. Property rates were high, so drapers like John Lewis, Arthur Liberty, and Charles Jenner expanded by creating department stores. Now, Underwoods was established in 1895 at the height of the department store movement. So let's consider what difference it made to Borchester, beginning with who worked there. Staffing of the early department stores had been dominated by men, but by the 1860s, women were employed in greater numbers. And this was not sadly due to a great feminist leap forward, but rather because they earned £25 a year, whereas men were paid 40. By 1900, 250,000 women were working in shops. We can consider their lives through the eyes of a young woman from Ambridge. Let's call her Lisa, and here she is. She hasn't yet met William Forrest, let alone given birth to Doris, Ted and Tom. Her choices for work would have been agriculture, domestic service or shop work. Agricultural work was declining in the Victorian era, and domestic service accounted for 40% of women's work in the 1851 census. It was 50% in London, but it was hard and rough work. And I know from my grandmother's experience that domestic servants were at the mercy of their employers. So Underwoods must have seemed like a better option. So how would Lisa have travelled each day from Ambridge to Borchester? Well, she didn't, because living in was the norm. In 1891, there were 500,000 shop workers living in. Lisa would have shared a room or a dormitory, and unless Underwoods was especially enlightened, it would have been cramped and it would have been dirty. Food of poor quality and baths were extras that she would have to pay for. Men and women were strictly segregated, as we can see from this cartoon of the time. Hours were really long. At Whiteley's in London, assistants stood all day and they worked from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. And they could be fined for gossiping or idling. A letter from a member to the Shop Assistants Union says, "The bedrooms are like barns with water trickling out of the walls, and we cannot sleep for the cold." A London shopgirl drowned herself in 1880 because she was in so much pain for standing for so long. The Pall Mall Gazette proposed in 1887 that business owners could provide an afternoon a week off and permission to sit down when it didn't interfere with the job. That didn't happen. But by the early 1900s, staff were agitating for change, and various bills to enforce improved conditions were defeated, but staff welfare was on the agenda. And department store owners finally began to realise that employing staff without easy access to washing facilities or a good night's sleep reflected rather badly on them. By 1912, all the London stores allowed staff to live out. Accommodation was improved for the ones who who chose to live in, and larger stores offered evening classes, libraries, and sporting activities. So things changed and life would have improved for Lisa. And although equal pay is many years away, there was for the first time an opportunity for working class women to move into middle management roles. Women customers preferred to discuss their clothing and household requirements with other women who rose to become department heads. And thus shop work offered a career to women like Lisa, something that had hitherto not been a prospect for women of her class. The work was cleaner and safer than factory work, and it's unsurprising that it was now an attractive choice. One vocational guidance worker wrote that, "In all essential features, the work of distribution is light, clean, easy, and pleasant. Factory work apparently ruined the hands, but shop assisting allowed them to remain clean and soft, the important things." So who were Lisa's customers and what attracted them to Underwoods? The department stores of the Victorian era play a really important part in social history, as for the first time, they provided women with the opportunity to visit a public space without an escort. One can imagine the excitement of the ladies of the Netherbourne and Lawson Hope estates as they were driven into Borchester in their carriages to visit Underwoods, although this is Selfridges, and enjoy the tea room, hair salon, and browsing gloves of every colour. Because for the first time in shopping history, there was no imperative to buy. Browsing was not only permitted, but it was encouraged, and goods were price marked. In 1909, Selfridges became the first department store in the UK to install a ladies' loo, an innovation rapidly adopted by other stores such as Underwoods. The history of public lavatory provision for women is a fascinating topic in itself. In Victorian Britain, almost all public toilets were for men, thus greatly restricting the ability of women to travel. A restriction known as the urinary leash. With a lavatory in the store, Lady Netherbourne's shopping trip was no longer limited by the capacity of her bladder. Just contemplate for a moment what an astonishing difference this made to the lives of women who were otherwise trapped in their homes, however comfortable or palatial. A whole day could be whiled away at the department store, out of sight of husbands and male guardians. And there was entertainment there as well as shopping, fashion shows, string quartets, exhibitions, and even novelty acts. I'll now move on to consider the place of Underwoods in modern times. It must be doing something right to have survived for so long, but I'm baffled about the reasons for its success. There's never been a reference to it being sold to a larger chain, so we must assume it's still family-owned and independent, and this is quite an achievement, given that in 2024, there were less than 150 independent department stores left in England and Wales, whereas some 850 are now defunct, and you might recognise some of these names. In Borchester, Underwoods has seen off a number of competitors. 3 stores in Felpersham are no more: Thomas and Riley, Jenkins, and Benson's, which also had a branch in Borchester. Dan once bought a cashmere cardigan for Doris in the Benson's sale, a purchase that I imagine would have been totally wasted on her. Doris, not realising that that's where Dan had bought it, returned it to Underwoods, who helpfully exchanged it for a green one. And this over-generous customer service ethic has extended help to Ambridge over the years, providing, for example, clothes for a fashion show organised by Peggy in aid of the church bells, and a hamper for a raffle at the Bull. Yet, in the last 75 years, Underwoods has never attracted staff from Ambridge. No villager has even applied for a job at Underwoods, except for Nigel, who once worked for a few weeks in the food hall. The average department store salary in the UK is £28,000 plus benefits. Yet Chelsea has never been minded to work in the salon, the younger villagers have never had holiday jobs there, and the Grundys and Horrobins prefer to work at the chicken factory than on the perfume counter. And furthermore, no one from Ambridge has even dated anyone who works for Underwoods. Indeed, I cannot recall any Underwood staff ever entering the village, whether for a drink in the Bull or to see an Ambridge pantomime, although this could be put down to good taste on their part. 21st century department stores have flexed their business model to diversify in a changing world. The new Camp Hobson store in Newbury even includes a funeral director's. 24% of department store sales are currently online. And here, as ever, Underwoods is an outlier. It has no web presence at all, not even a website listing opening times, let alone an online shop. Ambridge doesn't do online shopping. The Yodel delivery van is seemingly a stranger to the village. We don't hear the inhabitants complaining about deliveries being late or going to the wrong address, a common problem in rural areas. I find it curious that Underwoods has not felt the need to diversify in this way, particularly as it has lost some of its most enthusiastic customers. Jennifer and Caroline have died, and Shula's moved to Sunderland. Jill and Peggy are not as mobile these days. Rex used to drive Peggy to Underwoods every week, but this hasn't been mentioned for quite some time. So, who does shop there, and what do they buy? We hear a great deal about the food hall, and we know that Lillian buys her Danish bacon there, Susan buys tiramisu, and Asra shopped there at the start of Ramadan, although we don't know what she bought. They sell hampers. Lillian bought one for Jacob to apologise for being ill-tempered, although she plonked it down on his stethoscope and broke it. Like most department stores, it sells clothes, and I feel sure that Lillian is a regular visitor to the lingerie department. Tom and Natasha took Pat to Underwoods to buy an outfit for her birthday, and Lillian hauled Tony there to buy him a cashmere jumper. She made him change out of his overalls first. Mick bought jigsaws for Joy, so there must be a toy or gift department. And it has that mainstay of department stores, a haberdashery, where Susan bought wool to knit for the twins. And bedding too. When Bert stayed at Ambridge View, he complained about Susan's premium Egyptian cotton sheets bought from Underwoods. Many of us will remember a childhood trip to Santa's Grotto at our local department store, and Tony recently reminisced about seeing Father Christmas in Underwoods in Felpersham. That would have been quite the Christmas miracle, given that they don't have a branch there. Perhaps he was thinking about Benson's, who do. So, how exactly has Underwoods survived the economic and social upheavals of the late 20th and 21st centuries? Their profits surely cannot be entirely sustained by Vince Casey's meat and Helen's cheese, although they were swelled by the £10,000 they fined Bridge Farm over the E. coli outbreak. Underwoods is indeed full of mystery. The workers of Ambridge shun it, and it must be truly dreadful if the chicken factory is preferable. I won't show you a picture of a chicken factory, as they are honestly too upsetting. The villagers balk at fraternising with Underwood's staff. They're willing to supply the food hall with goods and to shop there, but perhaps even this is due to lack of choice. As Sanderson points out, there are only 3 retail outlets ever referred to in the Archers: Underwoods, the Cash and Carry, and the Village Shop, although since he wrote that, we can add the supermarket to the list. We've seen that Underwoods does not have an online shop, or indeed any online presence at all. We never hear advertisements on Radio Borsetshire, even though a Kerry Davis once wrote a fine jingle for it. And yet it thrives in a particularly difficult market. My suspicion is that the store is a huge money laundering operation run by management that is so crooked that even the residents of Ambridge know to steer clear and keep stum. Attempts to discuss this hypothesis with the Borsetshire police failed, as they are too busy with a confidential case in Yorkshire. I intend to research Underwood's ownership further, and if I'm not at next year's conference, you will know that I discovered something and I've been done away with by the shady figures who control the store. Maybe it's an organised crime gang, or possibly Matt Crawford. And here are my references. All mistakes are mine. Thank you very much.
That's really great. Thank you so much. There are a lot of comments in the chat. Thank you very much. No, good, positive comments, and a lot of theories. I just wanted to say that you said you were baffled by its success, and I believe it just sells absolutely everything that could possibly be sold. And Sarah Playfair got there before me in the chat and said she wondered whether they had a pet department like Harrods. And I'm convinced that if Kirsty and Rex had just thought about it, they could have gone to Underwoods and got their beavers there.
Maybe.
So we've got a couple of minutes. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask Jane? Because if not, we'll move straight on to Tim. Okay, I can't see any hands at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Jane. Okay, so next up is Tim Vercelotti, who is here because I've seen him.
Yep. Hi. Good to see you, Sarah Kate.
Brilliant. Okay. Right, you have been pinned, so I shall leave you to get on with it.
Okay. All right. Going to share my audio here. I have a couple of clips to play, and this technology has thwarted me in the past, so I'll pause after the first one to see if folks actually have heard the sound. But thank you all for including me in this. It is just an absolute pleasure to be back with you all. Just by way of introduction, I'm a professor of political science at Western New England University. It's a small college in Springfield, Massachusetts, about 90 miles west of Boston. We have a summer program in London, and I run the program, and that is how I became familiar with the Archers. I've been a listener for 11 years now, and it's a wonderful entree into culture, and also great folks to work with and share a common interest. So I teach social and political philosophy, race and politics, and I teach a course on English village culture where I use the Archers quite readily in class as well, and it's a lot of fun. This particular storyline resonated with me, the discovery of a controversial painting at Lower Loxley, because these are issues that many countries and cultures are wrestling with. Pasts filled with injustice and inhumanity, and how to reconcile with that and move forward. This is something that we certainly deal with here in the United States as well. And I found this storyline a great entry point to talk about these issues. So let me proceed. So this was a storyline that unfolded from March through June of 2023, the discovery of a painting that showed a naval officer of the East India Trading Company and a possible slave ship in the background raised really hard questions about art, race, and history. So I was curious. There is a range of reactions among the characters. How does that map onto views among the British public in the debate over monuments to the slave trade? Also, what were the options that were open to the Pargeters when they discussed how to address the painting? And then, was there another path they might have taken based on the choices that have been made in other situations? So here's the timeline. Freddie Pargeter, heir to the stately manor, is looking for ways to attract more young people as guides and as visitors to Lower Loxley. He's revised the tour, and he invites his friend and distant relative, Nolatando Madicane, Kate's daughter, who's visiting from Durban, South Africa, and who's just finished her qualifications to be a history teacher. They go on the tour. Freddie tries out his narration. They notice a painting on the gallery landing on the tour. The next day, the episode ends with Nolatando saying she's been using her phone to search something about a painting, but we need to wait until the next day to get a sense of what the painting depicts. Freddie panics. He covers it with a dust sheet. His mother, Elizabeth, is away on a course, and when she returns the next day, she and Lily and Freddie debate what to do. Freddie wants to just take it down. He finds it offensive. He worries that it's going to offend visitors to Lower Loxley. Elizabeth wants to keep it in place, adding a panel with explanatory text. Lily tries to offer a middle ground. She supports posting the text panel, but beneath an empty space, she recommends selling the painting, donating the proceeds to charity as a form of reparation, so a charity that would benefit marginalized groups. But Elizabeth is adamant that the painting must stay in place. So on the next slide, I have some dialogue from the March 10th episode. And let's see if my audio is working. I'm going to pause after it plays and just check in with you all to see if you heard it.
This afternoon, we'll sit down and draft a new text panel. As soon as it's in place, we'll brief the guides on the situation and reopen this area.
That's your decision.
Well, we're not leaving it looking like that.
I really think we should take it down.
You can't just erase the past, Freddie.
We have a duty of care towards our visitors.
We also have a duty of care towards history.
Okay, can someone indicate in the chat, did the audio come through? Oh,
Clearly, yes.
oh, victory. I'm so happy. Okay, so we can move on. I just have two more excerpts of audio, but they are instructive. So we see that the positions that Elizabeth and Freddie are staking out here. And these are positions very often encountered in debates. So for difficult pieces of art and statues and monuments to very difficult periods of history. So they eventually agree to defer to a decision by the Lower Loxley trustees. Freddie hopes they'll decide to sell the painting, but they vote to keep it in place. Elizabeth again recommends the placard and suggests that Freddie train the guides to discuss the issue in an informative and sensitive way. That evening, there's a birthday party for Elizabeth at the Bull, and at one point, Freddie, still put out by the sequence of events, heads out to the outdoor patio, and David Archer, his uncle, follows with him. He shares with David that the painting brings back horrific memories of Philip Moss's white slavery ring, the explosion at Grey Gables, and the suffering of one of the workers, which the Mosses offensively referred to as horses, Blake, who was seriously injured while working there. Freddie was also present at the time of the explosion and rushed into the kitchen where it had occurred and pulled Linda Snell out and to safety. And in subsequent episodes, Freddie has talked about the PTSD, I suppose you might say, that he still carries from that experience.
But don't you see? I have first-hand knowledge of this. Blake.
Oh, of course.
That day at Grey Gables.
Yeah, I never even thought.
You see, the thing is, the people who bought that painting, they were my ancestors, right?
Right.
And those same people were proud to show off a portrait of a man who bought and sold human beings.
I suppose.
No, they were. There's no suppose about it. They hung it up in pride of place. And Mum's no more related to them than you are. But I am.
Yes, you are.
Well, that's my bloodline right there. My however many great-grandfather obviously thought the bloke in that picture was terrific. But I don't. I've seen what it does to people.
After that, David convinces Elizabeth to have the painting removed and stored. Elizabeth finds out the painting was torn during the removal, which occurred under Freddie's supervision. Freddie says he knows nothing about the damage. They need to restore the canvas at significant expense. A trustee, Brandon, arrives to assess the situation. He concludes Freddie is not ready to inherit in 2 years' time. And I checked, Freddie's date of birth is 12 December 1999. So during the storyline, he was 23. And so in theory, he could have inherited at the age of 25. Freddie's not ready to inherit in 2 years' time and announces he'll recommend that the board delay a decision on the inheritance. The delay comes to pass. Freddie, reflecting on his troubled past, and we recall he was sent to prison for drug dealing and lack of qualifications, wonders if he will ever inherit Lower Loxley.
Mum, this is never going to change. They keep doing it. A huddle, and then they come up saying that they need more time. Put it off. Put everything off.
Yeah, but not forever.
No? What they decided today isn't to delay the day I inherit, but to delay the decision. A year, a couple of years, and then they'll get together again, look through my record, criminal conviction, time inside, no serious qualifications, and they'll put it off again. By the time I inherit the house, if I ever do, I'll be as doddery as them.
Don't, Freddie.
So actually, no. There really is no point. No point at all.
So we see here that the storyline is now shifting direction. It's gone beyond the painting to really talk about Freddie and his future and his prospects for inheriting Lower Loxley. And that's where the story continues. Freddie steps back from his role at Lower Loxley, ramps up his DJ work, and then eventually finds his way, curiously, to a management position at the abattoir at Casey Meats. So as sometimes happens with the Archers, and we've all noticed this, a storyline will go dormant, and that's what happens with the painting storyline. I'm also aware, though, that things go dormant, and then all of a sudden, when we least expect, the storyline comes roaring back. And so I do hope we'll return to this issue because there's still so much more to say about this. And so I'll continue by analyzing the various reactions and what other paths the pargeters could have taken in this scenario. So we never see the painting. This one on the left, though, is from the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, portrait of an East India Company captain circa 1800 by Stephen Henson, and we see a ship in the background. Could have looked like the painting at Lower Loxley. It's missing the seafaring navigational tools that were also in the description of the painting that we hear about early in the storyline. So in the storyline, we see reactions that we see in real life as well when communities are wrestling with reminders of painful aspects of history. Freddie, not wanting to offend or harm visitors to Lower Loxley, says we've just got to get rid of it. We've got to hide it. Elizabeth says, no, we need to recontextualize it. We need to explain what it is and face it. Nolatando, the one person of color in the storyline, says, even if you put this in storage, there could be other paintings. Freddie wants to do a new audit of the art holdings at Lower Loxley, and you can't just sweep it under the rug. You have to find some way to address what's going on. Lily's idea is intriguing because it brings up the prospect of reparations, a subject that both the UK and the United States have been wrestling with on large and small scales. And then, and I didn't have a chance to use the dialogue here, it's just a couple of lines, but the older white men weigh in. Oliver Sterling and Neil Carter are new guides in training at Lower Loxley, and they're whinging because Oliver has been assigned to the scullery and Neil is minding the coat and bag check. But they talk about what's happening with the painting and ponder if everybody's overreacting a bit to it. So we get that perspective as well. So this all summons up events that occur, and these events predate summer 2020, but they really ramp up and come into sharp focus in summer 2020 after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Both countries try to come to terms with difficult elements of the past. There are Black Lives Matter protests targeting memorials to slave traders. Here in the United States, it's targeting Confederate war heroes, other symbols of white power and privilege. And this gives us an opportunity to touch base a little bit on public opinion. The picture on the left are protesters tearing down a statue to a 17th century slave trader, Edward Colston. Once the statue's on the ground, they symbolically knelt on its neck to summon the symbolism of the police kneeling on the neck of George Floyd until he dies. They then dumped the statue in Bristol Harbor. iNews, which publishes a paper called iPaper, commissioned the polling from Redfield and Wilton Strategies to do an online survey of Great Britain to ask about these issues and what should be done with these monuments. So a bit of the survey, which of the following possibilities would you most prefer to be done with the public statues of historical figures with connections to the slave trade? It was an online sample of 1,500 respondents on 11 June 2020. It was weighted to reflect the population of England, Wales, and Scotland. And polling is in my background as well. And polls of the UK very frequently omit Northern Ireland because the opinion dynamics are just very different there. So we're looking at Great Britain here. Among all adults, 29% keep the statues where they are, 49% remove them and put them in a museum, 13% destroy them entirely. We see very large age effects here among the lowest age group, 18 to 24. 31% say destroy the statues, and that figure drops fairly consistently across age groups to the point where the folks 65 and over, only 6% offer that. The plurality position, and in some of the age categories, the majority position is remove the statues and put them in a museum as opposed to keep them where they are. Now, these choices do not really perfectly track with the options that the pargeters were facing, because there was no option for keep them where they are and provide greater context, which is what Elizabeth was supporting. We also see significant partisan differences. Respondents were asked what party they voted for in the 2019 general election. I've only used the two major parties just for lack of space, but we see 42% of conservatives say keep the statues where they are. Another 42% put them in a museum. Labor, a very different distribution, 19% keep them where they are, 58% the museum option, and 19% destroy them entirely. Now, the results are broken out by region as well. And so I wondered, did they get any completes in Borsetshire? So we take a look at the West Midlands distribution. 21% keep them where they are, 51% remove them and put them in a museum, and 16% destroy them entirely. So official and unofficial approaches to this issue in late 2020. The conservative government issued advice to museums, galleries, and other organizations: retain and explain. So contextualize, keep statues and historical objects that with ties to the slave trade, keep them in place, put them in context. An activist group, the Stop Trump Coalition, noting Donald Trump was president at the time, he was running for re-election. They asked volunteers to crowdsource a map of statues and monuments that, quote, celebrate slavery and racism. You see the map on the left side of the panel. No marks in the area that we would expect around Borsetshire, but Lower Loxley could have been on there eventually had people, had this made its way into the Borchester Echo, I guess. Anyway, topple the racist. The webpage FAQ does say this should be a local decision. Taking down a statue could also include moving it to to a museum, for example. So let's turn to literature on philosophy, art, public memory to get some additional guidance. Joanna Birch-Brown, senior lecturer at the University of Bristol, uses a concept called transitional justice for guidance in how to address statues, monuments, and other symbols of slavery. She defines it as the study of what justice requires of societies in coming to terms with a violent past. This process must include justice, truth, reparation, and guarantees of non-recurrence. So pros and cons of 4 different approaches. Preserving. You have to be careful not to avoid downplaying the seriousness of the injustice. Removing. Here's an opportunity for education and healing, but it might be seen as an attempt to escape an uncomfortable history. Recontextualizing, as was proposed, it's got to be bold. A plaque might not get the job done. And then reclaiming, you could combine this with recontextualizing. What this means, though, is a real repurposing of the space, when especially done by members of marginalized groups. And that process can then repair and empower those individuals. We get more guidance from a lecturer in visual culture, Emma Mahoney, at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin. She looks at empty plinths as a kind of reclamation. She does a case study of the Colston statue in Bristol, statues to Lenin in Ukraine that were torn down, and then Nelson's Pillar in Dublin, a symbol that critics called a symbol of British imperialism that the IRA eventually blew up. What's left behind can be a way of looking at remembering the past, but in a way that also looks to the present and perhaps to a more healing future. So the empty plinth could provide a contemplative setting, just the absence of the statue, or it could be a place for artwork or a rotation of temporary works of art to reclaim the space, which is what happened with the Colston plinth in Bristol. So each of these four, of the four approaches that Birch Brown outlines, relate to the responses to the slave ship painting. Preservation. Oliver Sterling and Neil Carter wonder, well, why do we have to do anything here? Removal. Freddie's choice, but Nolatando says this isn't going to address the underlying issue. Lily's recommendation to sell and donate the proceeds as a kind of reparation might help. Recontextualization is what Elizabeth and the trustees recommend, but is that placard going to be enough? I think Birch Brown might be very skeptical there. Is it bold enough? What about the fourth approach, reclamation? Could the space on the gallery landing be repurposed, either as an empty space with a posted narrative or an alternate piece of art that flips the meaning of the space in a restorative way? I have a suggestion. If the Partriders decide to go in that direction, they might ask for a temporary loan of this painting, which I saw last summer when I took my students to the London Sugar and Slavery exhibit at the Museum of London Docklands. This is a painting by children called The Slave Ship. They were participating in Breaking the Silence, a UNESCO education project on the transatlantic slave trade. It may be hard to see here, but the objects in the water are individuals trying to escape. It's a profoundly moving painting that speaks to anguish and fear and sorrow in a way that could repurpose that empty space on the gallery landing. So it's just a thought. I'll add one more before I finish up. I really do hope this comes back, this storyline, because we never knew who tore the canvas. And I have to say, as just idle speculation, my money's on Jim Lloyd, the keeper of the stolen bunting. So that's my theory. We'll see if it's borne out. I could totally see Jim doing that, but we'll see. Here are my works cited. Happy to share my slides with individuals if folks are interested. I'll stop sharing the screen now, and thank you for your time. And if time permits, happy to field questions.
Thank you so much, Tim, as always. It's really interesting. We also, there's a lot of discussion in the chat. I do think that the stats you showed for West Midlands, particularly, that was really interesting because they were actually at the higher or lower end of most of the categories. Which
yes, what's going on? Yeah.
Also, Chloe Reeves in the chat mentioned that it would have been very ethically complex to sell the painting. And
That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know where it would have been sold to be honest. Also, I was just doing a little bit of admin stuff when you were just finishing up, so I don't know if you said this because I heard you say bunting, but I'm starting to. I'm thinking that the torn canvas is very much going to be the most recent version of the bunting or, you know, the box helmet or whatever.
I agree, and I think the finger points to Jim Lloyd, but I could be wrong. That's
the
my
finger should
theory.
never point to Jim Lloyd.
Well, I think I could see his moral outrage getting the better of him as a professor of classics and history. We'll see.
We expect your fan fiction at any moment. Cara's handed up. Hi, Cara.
Hello. I was a director at Tate, and of course we grappled with a lot of this. And what I dropped into the chat was what we did, the Rex Whistler mural, which is a kind of reinterpretation and recontextualization. But I was struck when listening to this at the time that just previous to that, previous in Archer's years, maybe it was 10 years previous to that, but Elizabeth had mentioned that Lower Loxley had a museum. And in which case there's a lot of very clear guidance about how to do this, but it was never actually referenced. But I did think how they managed to get those different perspectives in the round through this storyline. I thought they did that in a really clever way, leaning into the different characters for that.
Yeah, and you're right about the museum, because remember, the Grundys need a piece for their ancient cider press, and they go to the museum at Lower Loxley to beg Elizabeth for it. So yeah. Okay.
Which had me with steam coming out of my ears when that particular storyline happened. But anyway, that's another paper completely.
We're running over by 2 minutes, but because we were running over by 4 minutes in the first section, I'm going to make an executive decision to allow Nicola to ask her question because her hand's up, and then we'll have to move on.
Okay, thank you. That was really great, Tim. And thank you, because I've been having to read Birch Brown quite a lot at the moment for a course I'm doing. So in my position as honorary psychology lecturer at the University of Felpersham, or FU as we like to call it, what do you think the hopes are of FU decolonialising their curriculum?
Better that they do it than to have outsiders do it. I'm here in America right now. We're those of us who work in race and politics and philosophy. We're walking a very difficult tightrope, and our curricula have the potential to be reviewed by the government with funding at stake. So I would say that if the faculty at Felpersham University could hold internal consultations, thoughtfully taking into account all voices, really paying attention to their students and students of color, I think that would be the most effective way to get it done. And that's what Birch Brown and Mahoney talk about, is the absolute importance of consultation, particularly by those who hold the power, for those who are less empowered.
Yes, I think we ought to bring Nancy Fraser in to consult on that. But yeah, I'm sure with a very deep, careful look, we might find one or two people with the understanding and perhaps even the expertise. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you so much, Tim. That's absolutely great, as always.
Thank you.
And I'm going to hand over to Helen Burrows, who's going to chair our next section. There you go.
Right, thank you very much, Sarah.
Oh wow, bloody!
Oh, we're here. Can you hear me all right? Yes.